Understanding the why behind behaviors is key to successful interventions. So, what are the roles of antecedents, triggers, and functions of behavior, and how can we understand what drives challenging behavior? Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna. We're behavior analysts who create weekly content about how to teach children with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about what drives challenging behaviors. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
So I thought about, the example of a car. And when you're driving a car, it doesn't just like stop working, but it might stop working if you drive over, a really big pothole and you also haven't changed the brakes or done any maintenance or changed the oil or replaced anything in your car. Your car needs constant attention. And if you don't do those things, then yeah, that one thing that you do, like driving over the pothole, might do something more drastic. But was it just that? No, it's everything. And so behavior is similar. It's usually we can look at an antecedent and say, like, this was the thing that came right before the behavior, but there are also so many other factors that come into play as to, like, why was it this antecedent? Or why did a behavior happen this time, but the same antecedent happened yesterday and the behavior didn't happen? There's so many times where it's the culmination of a bunch of different triggers or a bunch of different antecedents that culminate at the end of the day in one big challenging behavior. And it wasn't one of those things. But we could still look at the big picture and think about what kind of drives or motivates challenging behavior to help us understand it, because that can help us know how to react or how to treat it next time.
When I first got into ABA, I was told, okay, there's four functions of behavior, and they are, escape, attention, tangible, and sensory. And those are the functions, and that's all there is, and it's one or the other, and it's really clear cut. Here you go. I'm like, oh, this is easy. And then you start working in practice and you're going, well, wait a second, this isn't how it seems. People are, engaging in escape related behavior, but then it turns to attention, or, they might be escaping, but they also get their very preferred activity that they want. So is that tangible or is that escape? Like, how do I determine that? And then how do I treat it? Like, it's way different in practice than it is when reading a textbook or, sitting in a lecture being told what to do. So let's talk about those antecedents and triggers and how they all work with each other.
Right, because even though we are complex, human beings are very complex, we do try to pare it down to the most simple explanation as possible. We're not looking for like real roundabout explanations of behavior. So we do look at antecedents or triggers, which are really what happens right before a behavior occurs. So we could look at setting events, which happen even before an antecedent, which is they didn't sleep at night and they were cranky and maybe they're not feeling well, or maybe mom's out of town. These are all setting events which are important. But when we talk about antecedents, we want to find out what happened right before that behavior occurred. So, hopefully we've operationally defined what the behavior is so that everybody knows what they're looking for. But what is that thing that happened right before? So if the behavior is, hitting their friend, what happened right before they hit their friend? Did their friend take their toy? Did their friend call them a name? Were they asked to clean up? Were they told that there is a change in routine? Was somebody yelling and it was really loud? There's so many things that we can look at in the environment that we're looking for that happens right before a behavior occurred. Because when we can understand what comes right before that behavior, then we can understand what skills are missing and what proactive changes we could do to help prevent it in the future.
So just to give you an example, I actually went into a classroom a while ago now, but I was in a classroom and they said that the student was highly aggressive. And I looked at the teacher and I was like, what are you talking about? This is the most mild-mannered kid I've ever met. What do you mean? And she said, you've got to come in and take a look at this behavior. I said, okay, come in. So I went in and took a look at it. And what was happening is, it was typically happening right outside at recess time. And he was on the slide and there was a student in front of him who was on the slide and he would push the student to go down the slide. That was labeled as aggression. However, there was more instances of aggression as well. I'm putting aggression in quotation marks here. It was when students, they were asked to do some group work, and he wasn't included in the group. He would hit a student and the student would respond to him then. And anyways, by looking at that antecedent, we were looking and saying, okay, so I could, for instance, with the slide, it could be that he wanted the student in front of him to go down the slide, and that's why he was pushing. But it also happened, at the bottom of the slide, when he was getting off the slide, he would push a student on the playground. And what it really looked to be was interaction. He really wanted to interact with the students and didn't know how to get into their play. And then it happened again in group work. And I looked at that trigger. I looked at what happened right before. And it was the fact that the kids weren't including him and he wanted into that situation. So this quote unquote highly aggressive kid in a classroom, which he was so mild-mannered, he wasn't aggressive at all, actually happened to be just wanting in and wanting to know how to play and didn't know how to do that. So it's really important to look at what happens right before the behavior and the whole situation around it.
We actually think the antecedents are a little bit more important than the consequences. We're going to share one of our antecedent data sheets with this episode. So go check that out. We have another episode that talks about the 4 functions of behavior, which is episode 69, which, like Shayna said, has changed a lot. We're going to talk a little bit about what they currently are in terms of those discrete definitions of functions of behavior, but then talk about how much it's changed. So the functions of behavior are really saying that every behavior serves a purpose. It is either to get access to something or to get out of something. So us as human beings, as individuals, our students, our children are all either wanting to get access to a tangible, so like a toy or a food or a cookie or a paycheck, or access to attention. So that would be the second one. So the first one would be access to tangible. The second one is access to attention, which we all like. We want to come home and be able to debrief with our spouse or to call your friend on the phone and be able to get their attention. So those are very reinforcing. The third one is escape from demand or avoidance. So it's in presentation of a task or a demand. They'll engage in, some form of a behavior to get out of that. And that is something we all engage in. How many times are we
procrastination
scrolling on our phone instead of, doing the laundry or doing what it is that we're supposed to be doing? And then the fourth one is what can be called either automatic or sensory, which are things that are just naturally reinforcing. It could be things like, nail biting, or even food is one of it's automatically reinforcing. So those are, the big 4 that we've been talking about in ABA, and we'll go deeper. We've gone deeper in those in one of our previous episodes, so go check that out.
Other things to consider, though, in terms of, antecedent triggers in the environment, setting events happen way before what happens right then, but those are definitely things to keep in mind, and Shira brushed on them before. But if you're tired, you're more likely to engage in challenging behavior when work that you don't like happens to occur, right? Or when you're hangry, you're more likely to engage in challenging behavior. That could be past trauma, for instance. It could be too much screen time. They've had way too much screen time and you call them away from the screen, and that's when challenging behavior occurs. So all of these things can also contribute to that, along with like lack of skills, right? We teach replacement skills for certain things because they just, can't do things. And half of that is communication and having that, lacking communication skills. So making sure that you're recognizing that when you're determining function as well.
Right. So when we're looking at function and seeing a student who is screaming to get the toy that they want, yeah, we're looking to understand the function. Oh, well, it's access to tangible, but it's because they don't have the skill, like Shayna said in her example, to communicate it in another way. They don't know how to ask for that toy, or they don't know how to make a social bid for play or for conversation. So we can't just look at it as, well, we figured out that this, child is misbehaving in order to get access. We have to look at it as, well, this behavior is working for them to get them access to something. And what can I give them? What skill can they learn to get access to it in a different way? So it's not about the, bad behavior that we're looking at, but we can get information about the things that they need to build skill in.
So Gregory Hanley talks about synthesized reinforcement. And what does that mean? It means that, those things that Shira talked about, the functions of behavior, escape, avoidance, attention, it's not always as discrete as that. It's usually not as discrete as that. Things can occur simultaneously. So like I mentioned before, they can escape work to go to something preferred, or, they get attention and they get access to tangibles at the same time. Or, there's three or four of those functions occurring at once. And that's what Hanley means by synthesized reinforcement.
Yeah, and synthesized reinforcement really accounts for, I think, a lot of our own behavior also. I'm not just scrolling my phone to avoid doing laundry. It also gives me access to things. There's also the sensory component of like, the lights and how stimulating it is. So there's so many things happening at once that describe so much of our behavior. So it doesn't really matter. We don't, according to, Hanley, we don't need to know exactly which function it is. The important part is that can you get the child that you're working with to be happy, relaxed, and engaged? And if so, that tells you a lot of information about the things that they like, because really, challenging behavior or a function is telling you what they want. They really, really want attention. They really, really want access or escape or whatever it is that they want. So if you can give them everything that they want, if you can figure out what those things are that get them to HRE, happy, relaxed, and engaged, then that really tells you what all their reinforcers are. They want the iPad on the beanbag chair with somebody beside them eating, their favorite snack, let's say.
It also tells you what they don't want, because if you can, go from HRE and then they engage in challenging behavior, you can really see what it was that was a trigger. So that is really, very briefly, how Hanley starts doing some of his assessments, but that's for a totally other episode.
Right. So what it doesn't necessarily matter, is it the iPad? Is it, giving up the iPad? Or is it the transition? Or is it the attention? What Hanley is saying is that challenging behavior comes up when kids are asked to do things that they don't want to do with people that they don't like. So it doesn't matter if it's, the demand or the escape or the attention. It doesn't matter so much. It just has to be get them to do things that they like, get them to be happy, relaxed, and engaged. And then we can work on the challenging behavior. And that's essentially synthesized reinforcement.
And that's it. There's your degree in ABA. Just kidding. But from this behavior though, it's really important to do that assessment because we need to take that function-based approach when we're treating challenging behavior. Otherwise, the challenging behavior will come back or, come back in some other way, and it might be even more dangerous, right? So really using this knowledge to create behavior change by conducting that functional behavior assessment. We really want to observe those patterns of when and where behavior happens. We've included an antecedent log with this episode so you can look at what the antecedents were and if there's patterns, right? So identifying those antecedents, looking at the consequences, but lots of the times it's the antecedents we're really looking at that really maintain that behavior.
And then looking at how you can modify the environment and potentially teach replacement behavior. So if they really just want to be in the back of the room on the iPad in their favorite chair, then what can we do to teach them replacement behaviors? It could be asking for a break. It could be that their desk is maybe closer to that seating so that they could take the break easier. It could be using visuals so that they understand when that's available and when it's not, and giving them a way to get that replacement, to use a replacement skill to get that same function but faster and easier. And we like to talk about the skill of shaping, which is huge because you don't want to like rip off the Band-Aid really quickly. You don't want to take them from the things that they love the most to the things that are the hardest because that's going to elicit behavior. So when you're taking them from the things that they love the most and you know what the function of their behavior is, like they have a really hard time, let's say, tolerating transitions. You're not going to make them tolerate the hardest transition. You're going to start with the smallest thing possible that they could be successful with and shape that up and then work up to something that is a little bit harder and harder. And that's how replacement behaviors work. We're not teaching them a behavior and triggering challenging behavior at the same time. We're teaching them so that they can be successful.
And then you want to reinforce those positive behaviors. So, once you've taught some replacement behaviors, making sure that you are balancing that by reinforcing and by reinforcing immediately. So, when you see, a new skill pop up, wow, that's really great. And, they finally ask for a break instead of, engaging in challenging behavior, give them that break because they asked for it so, so nicely. And, you can use something called differential reinforcement. Most of us have heard of this, but differential differential reinforcement, giving them, if they do it really, really well, you give a lot of reinforcement. Great. Yes, you can have a break and a break for 5 minutes. If they need some prompting to ask for a break, you give them a shorter break if they needed prompting. And that's what differential reinforcement is giving them a lot of reinforcement for a job really well done. And if they need some prompting or need some help, you give them some kind of reinforcement, but just a smaller amount of it.
Yeah, and this is really key, differential reinforcement, because we're teaching so many skills that it can sometimes get a little bit messy, right? Like I had to prompt in the middle, or there was a little bit of challenging behavior, but then they recovered. And so I want them to still get some sort of reinforcement. So we can use this tool so effectively, and the student will learn that their behavior will go where the reinforcement flows, right? So the more reinforcement that you're offering for really clean communication. They asked so nicely and they didn't need any prompting, like, have a party. That's a ton of reinforcement. Versus, they really tried, but they needed a little bit of support and maybe had a little bit of a behavior in the middle. They can get a little bit of reinforcement. So really using this tool is going to help a lot.
So really just understanding what drives behavior is the first step in making that real lasting change. So when we shift from focusing in on stopping behavior and really understanding what the function is and what the reason behind the challenging behavior is, we really can have a more effective and compassionate interventions.
For more information on what drives challenging behavior, click the link on or around this video or in the description to claim your free antecedent log. We also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos, and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.